Rain poured down like a flood across the highways leading into downtown San Francisco, turning golden streetlights into hazy streaks, tangled in the wail of urgent horns. Inside a silver-gray BMW, Julian Hartley, 43, founder and CEO of a billion-dollar tech startup, gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His usually cool gray eyes were now stormy, shattered by emotions he could no longer contain. Just hours earlier, Julian had been standing in his glass-walled office on the 48th floor of Hartley Innovations, commanding an empire of algorithms, patents, and venture deals. But one phone call had torn it all down. "Mr. Hartley, I'm truly sorry. We ran multiple tests. The results are conclusive. There's no biological path forward for you to have children." The words echoed in his mind like a funeral bell. In a world where Julian controlled markets, hired and fired executives, and bent data to his will, his own body had betrayed him. Legacy, bloodline, a family, all of it vanished into thin air. He had always believed himself untouchable. The car sped through the pounding rain, its engine roaring in tandem with the thunder above. Julian didn't see the headlights in the opposite lane or hear the blaring horns. His mind drifted into a void flooded by memories. His father's stern voice rising from the past, a man who once said, "You must leave behind something that endures." It had felt like destiny. Now it felt like a curse. Then, a sharp curve, the shriek of metal against the guardrail, an explosion, and Julian's world went black. Just a few blocks away, in a weathered brown Honda, Raina Ellis, 34, was driving home after a long day at the Oakland Community Arts Center. The car was silent, save for the rhythmic tap of rain against the windshield and the soft murmur of a jazz tune from the old radio. She was tired but at peace. Earlier that day, young Amari, one of her students, had finally painted his late mother's face for the first time. A small triumph, but one that meant the world. To Raina, every child at the center was part of her mother's legacy, healing wounded young souls with the power of art, reaching those lost in poverty, violence, and silence. The rain thickened. As she neared a stretch of road by the Bay Bridge, a blinding flash sliced through the night. Fire! A car lay overturned by the roadside, engulfed in flames, black smoke billowing upward like a scar against the dark sky. Without hesitation, Raina swerved, pulled over, and slammed her car into park. She flung open the door, slipping on the wet pavement, and sprinted toward the fire. Heat lashed her skin, and gasoline fumes seared her lungs, but she kept moving. The car door was twisted, barely hanging on. Raina climbed over the mangled frame and yanked with everything she had. Inside, a man lay unconscious, blood trickling from his temple, his shirt soaked in crimson and shattered glass. "Hey, wake up!" she shouted, trembling as she pulled him out of the seat. She dragged him away from the car, just seconds before the BMW exploded behind them, a ball of fire erupting into the rain like the end of the world. They fell onto the pavement, Raina shielding his head with her own body, both of them gasping for breath. Soaked to the bone, he opened his eyes. Those gray eyes stared up at her, dazed, wounded, and strangely grateful. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. In that moment, on the brink of death and life, something unspoken sparked between them. Fluorescent lights burned above Julian as he opened his eyes. The sterile scent of antiseptic stung his nose and his stomach churned. Beeping machines pulsed around him. Heart monitor, oxygen reader, IV drip. A cold symphony of life preserved by technology. A dull ache ran down his spine and chest, but that wasn't what occupied Julian's mind. It was her face, the woman in the rain. Deep brown eyes, hands cold but comforting, a voice trembling with urgency. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." He replayed those words over and over, clinging to them like the only thread tying him to the meaning of a day that nearly ended in oblivion. A nurse entered, checking the monitors. Julian rasped, voice cracking like old glass. "The woman who saved me Where is she? The nurse blinked, surprised. We don't know, Mr. Hartley. She left before anyone could ask her name. Julian clenched the hospital sheet. He wasn't used to owing anyone, especially not someone who'd risked their life for his. As soon as he was moved out of the ICU, Julian called for Janelle Cruz, his longtime assistant. His voice was still raw, but firm. I need to know who she is, the woman who pulled me from the car. Janelle, with her sleek ponytail and ever-present iPad, gave a small nod. On it, sir. She didn't need to ask why. 48 hours later, a slim folder landed on his hospital table. Janelle stood beside him, her voice crisp and efficient. Her name is Raina Ellis, 34, art teacher and director of a youth center in Oakland. Orphaned young, earned a full-ride scholarship. No criminal record, no debts, clean slate. Julian flipped through the file, stopping at a photo of Raina surrounded by a circle of laughing kids, her smile bright as sunshine breaking through a storm. He didn't know why, but his heart skipped a beat. That afternoon, Willow and Honey, a small cafe tucked into an old corner of Oakland, felt quieter than usual. Soft sunlight filtered through its large windows, casting golden slants over worn wooden tables. The smell of dark roasted coffee lingered in the air, warm and familiar. Raina Ellis stepped inside, her hand resting lightly on her stomach, a habit she'd formed unconsciously since learning she was carrying twins. She wore a soft green sweater dress that hugged her changing shape, and her coiled hair was tied back, revealing her gentle cheekbones. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on the man sitting silently in the back corner. Julian Hartley stood as soon as he saw her. He wore a charcoal gray shirt, his tailored coat folded neatly beside him. Yet he looked out of place in the cozy space. The untouched cup of coffee before him suggested he'd been waiting. Ms. Ellis, his voice was slightly unsteady, far from the commanding tone of the tech magnate the media knew. Raina nodded, polite but guarded. You're the man from the car. Julian gave a soft, almost shy smile. Julian. And I owe you my life. She sat down, her hand still protectively on her belly. I only did what was right. Anyone would have. Julian shook his head. Not everyone runs into fire for a stranger. Silence hovered between them. Neither knew how to cross the line dividing their worlds. One was a man accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. The other, a woman who stretched every dollar to keep a community center alive and prepare for the arrival of 2 lives. When the server brought out cornbread and herbal tea, Raina smiled, not guarded this time. My mom used to say, food is how we connect. She baked cornbread for the neighborhood kids every Sunday. Julian smiled back. For the first time in weeks, something felt easy. She sounds like an amazing woman. She was, Rainey said, her voice softening. She passed when I was 13, cancer, but she left me a dream, to build a safe space for kids like I once was. She spoke of the art center, of Amari, and how she sometimes walked 10 blocks to save on gas. Julian listened, captivated. There was no pretense in her voice, just passion, grit, and heart. Then Raina inhaled deeply. There's something I need to say. I'm pregnant, with twins. Julian froze, but he didn't pull away. That's wonderful, he said sincerely, but it must be tough. Raina nodded, this time not looking away. Their father. He's no longer in the picture. It's just me. Julian lowered his gaze. Old pain rose within him. I know what it means to be alone. I found out last week. I'm infertile. 2 strangers from different worlds. And yet, in that moment, they understood each other. Quietly. In the days following their cafe meeting, Julian couldn't get Raina out of his mind. It wasn't just because she had saved his life. It was the way she spoke about her mother in a hush, or how her eyes lit up when she mentioned Amari, as if her whole world was painted in emotion, not strategy or ambition. To Julian, that was rare. His world 5-star dinners, equity deals, and cold handshakes had little room for authenticity. He started texting Raina asking about her health, the center, the babies. She replied kindly, never eagerly, but every message from her felt like a sliver of light cutting through the thick glass wall between their worlds. A week later, Julian drove to Oakland unannounced. He wanted to see the youth center. Raina was in the middle of an art class, her students laughing and smearing colors across canvases. She looked surprised to see him at the doorway, his dark shirt standing out among the sea of color and children's laughter. "Not afraid of drowning in paint and paper?" she teased. Julian smiled, his gaze soft. "Not if you're the tour guide." They didn't say it, but something was quietly blooming, slow and cautious. Every time Julian looked at her, he felt something his years in business had never taught him: peace. But beauty rarely goes unchallenged for long. A photo surfaced on social media. Julian Hartley, tech billionaire, leaving a youth center in Oakland with a mystery woman. Gossip sites pounced, labeling Raina a pregnant gold digger, or worse, a modern-day Cinderella. The media storm hit hard. Then Clara Hartley arrived. Julian's older sister, guardian of the family name since their father's death, stormed into his office like a frontline general. She tossed a stack of photos onto his desk. "Who is she, Julian? A pregnant art teacher from Oakland? Do you think the Hartley name can be linked to someone like that?" Julian stood, voice strained but calm. "Her name is Raina. She saved my life." Clara crossed her arms, her voice sharpened to ice. "Or maybe she saw a chance at fortune. Are you planning to parade her into high society? Mother would roll over in her grave." Julian didn't argue, but something inside him stirred. Not fury, but resolve. To protect the one thing that had made him feel truly alive. That afternoon, as the door of the community center shut behind the last art class of the day, Raina sat quietly on an old wooden bench by the hallway. Inside her, the twins kicked gently, as if sensing the storm in her chest. She placed her hand over her belly, searching for a moment of calm, but her mind was a whirlwind. The tabloid lay on the desk, its headline bleeding red across the front page. Billionaire Julian Hartley entangled with Oakland's mystery single, Mother? Gold digger or fake fairy tale? She knew something like this would happen, but she hadn't imagined it would be this cruel. Then came Clara Hartley. Raina was filing lesson plans in her small office when the woman walked in. Expensive dress, unreadable face, disdain in her eyes. No greeting, no smile. "I'm Julian's sister," Clara said, pulling a white envelope from her purse and placing it on the desk. Inside was a check. $1 million. "You can use this to start fresh. Leave here, stay out of my brother's life." Raina looked at the check, then slowly met Clara's gaze. Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not drop. "Who do you think I am?" Clara shrugged. "A struggling teacher, pregnant, desperate, and not someone who belongs in our world." Raina placed the check back down, sliding it across the table. "I don't want your money. I've learned to live with less, but never without self-respect. And I hope one day you'll understand that." She rose from her chair, quiet but unyielding. "And you can tell Julian, I don't belong in his world. I never did, and I never will." Clara left, her satisfaction barely concealed. But in that room, Raina stood still. Her tears fell, not from pain, but from a loss she couldn't name. The kind of ache that comes when the only person who made you believe in hope becomes the one you have to walk away from. Julian returned to the community center 2 days later, carrying a bag of children's storybooks and a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. The flower, he'd learned, was Raina's mother's favorite, but the pale blue door was firmly shut. A note taped to the front read, "Classes paused for 1 week. Please do not leave items." He turned to ask the neighborhood kids, but they only shrugged. "Miss Raina's tired. She's not seeing anyone," one little girl said. Julian didn't give up. He called, no answer, texted, no reply. He drove around Oakland aimlessly, stopping at every place Rainey had once mentioned: the tiny library, the worn-down bakery, the mural-lined alley. But she was nowhere. That night, he sat alone in his sleek apartment, staring at her last message, glowing on his screen. "Don't look for me anymore, Julian. I don't belong there. He read it again and again, each word a needle. They saw each other one last time on a drizzly afternoon. Raina stood beneath the awning of an old church, her hand resting on her belly, her stance unwavering. Julian approached without an umbrella. Rain clung to his hair, soaked his shirt, but he didn't flinch. I just want to hear it from you, once, that this is really what you want. Raina looked up. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. I want what's best for the babies. And for me. You're a good man, Julian, but you belong to a different world. I can leave that world. For you. But I can't enter it. Silence. Heavy. Endless. Raina pressed her hand gently to his chest. You're good. Just not mine. Julian nodded, his voice nearly breaking. If you ever change your mind, come find me. She said nothing. Then she turned, her silhouette vanishing into the gray rain. Julian stood there for a long, long time. For the first time in his life, he'd lost something no wealth could ever win back. It was a gloomy afternoon, the sky blanketed in clouds like a warning. Raina left the center later than usual. As she stepped outside the gate, the first pain struck. Sharp, sudden, like a knife slicing through her. She froze, hand on her belly. Her skin went pale. Not now, not yet, she whispered, heart racing. She was only 32 weeks along. Another wave of pain crashed, stronger. She staggered, pulling out her phone and dialing the only person she trusted. Ms. Dolores, I think I'm going into labor. Just a few blocks away, Julian was seated in the most important meeting of the month, a multi-million-dollar AI acquisition, but his mind was elsewhere. Since Raina had walked out of his life, Julian hadn't been able to focus. His phone buzzed. Dolores, the elderly woman who once knew Raina's mother. Julian, you need to come to the hospital. Raina, she's in early labor. He didn't need another word. His chair clattered to the floor, his briefcase spilled papers across the carpet. Julian stormed out, ignoring shocked faces, missed calls, and protocol. In the car, he gripped the wheel tight. Please, let them be okay, he muttered, voice cracking. At the hospital, Raina was rushed into emergency care. Sweat beaded on her forehead, the pain hit in waves, her throat too tight for words. Dolores held her hand. You're strong. They'll be strong too. The door burst open. Julian rushed in, hair disheveled, shirt wrinkled, eyes wild with fear. Raina opened her eyes, dazed. You came? Julian clasped her hand, trembling. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. The doctor entered, face tight. We need to perform an emergency C-section. The babies are in distress. Raina nodded, tears spilling. She looked at Julian, gasping. If anything happens, take care of them. Julian leaned down, pressing his forehead to her hand. You'll be okay, all three of you. She was wheeled away. The doors shut in his face. Julian stood frozen. Time stopped moving. Dolores laid a hand on his shoulder. You love her, don't you? Julian didn't answer, but his eyes said everything. It's not gratitude, it's love. 2 agonizing hours passed. Julian paced the empty hallway, never sitting, never resting. Every passing nurse made him leap to his feet. Finally, the doors opened. A young doctor stepped out, pulling down his mask. She's stable. The twins are here. They're early, but both are breathing. They'll stay in NICU for a while, but they're little fighters. Julian collapsed into a chair, and for the first time in years, he cried. Not from loss, but for something just beginning. The NICU, Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, was unlike any place Julian had ever walked into. There were no bright lights, no stock tickers, no million-dollar deals, just the soft hum of machines, the fragile rhythms of tiny lungs, and the quiet heartbeat of a world both delicate and miraculous. Nora and Leah, his little angels, lay in incubators, each barely over 3 pounds. Their skin was as thin as petals, their fingers twitching gently whenever Julian pressed a fingertip to the glass. He sat beside them every day, never missing a moment, not out of obligation, but because something inside him had shifted. Julian learned how to scrub in, how to wear the hospital gown, how to whisper instead of speak. He read to the twins, using the deep, steady voice that once reassured shareholders. Now it became the first bedtime story voice for two premature souls born into chaos. Raina, now recovering in a standard room, woke each morning to a cup of warm tea, a folded art magazine, and a note in the now familiar handwriting. The girls had 5 meals more today. Nora grabbed my finger. Leah's still the loud one. She smiled. Even from a hospital bed, her heart felt lighter, as if someone else had quietly picked up her burdens. Each evening, Julian would wheel her to the NICU. They didn't speak much, but their eyes always said the same thing. We're in this together. Some nights, Raina woke to silence, only to find Julian asleep in the visitor chair, head resting on the arm, hand gently placed on top of the incubator as if guarding them with every breath. One night, she heard him whisper, "Daddy's here, not going anywhere," and her tears fell. Not from sadness, but because she finally understood love isn't a promise, it's what someone chooses to do when no one's watching. Julian had nothing to prove, no bouquets, no poetry, no grand speeches, just his presence. And day by day, hour by hour, that presence became the fabric of a family. The morning was cool, mist curling outside the hospital windows like a warning of what was coming. Raina was rocking Nora to sleep when Dolores tapped lightly at the door, her face clouded with concern. "Someone's here to see you. His name is Marcus Lane." Raina's heart stopped. That name was a blade, one she'd buried deep for months. Marcus, the biological father of the twins. The man who vanished the moment she told him she was pregnant. The man she thought she'd never see again. When Raina stepped into the hallway, he was there. Leather jacket, sunglasses, charm turned stale. His smile was slick, familiar in the worst way. "Been a while, Rain," he smirked. "Heard you're living the good life. Billionaire boyfriend, private hospital suite, 2 beautiful girls. Damn. What do you want?" she asked, voice like glass. Marcus shrugged and pulled a photo from his pocket. Julian holding Nora in the NICU. "Just wanted to say hello to my girls, maybe talk numbers." Each word oozed with greed. He hadn't come for love. He'd come to extort. Julian stepped into the hall at that moment. His gray eyes went cold. "Who are you?" "Marcus Lane, biological father of those babies," he said, full of challenge. "And I have rights." Julian moved in front of Raina. "You abandoned her. You have nothing but a last name." "Law doesn't always care," Marcus shrugged. "But who knows? Maybe the right number makes me disappear, quietly." Julian didn't flinch. He pulled out his phone. "Rachel, start the adoption paperwork. We'll take it to court if we must." Marcus turned to leave, but tossed one last thread over his shoulder. "I'm not going away that easy." Days later, the internet erupted. An anonymous video accused Raina of selling her babies to a billionaire for a better life. It was a cheap shot. The community buzzed with whispers. Hate mail flooded the youth center. Raina pulled inward, but Julian did not. He stepped in front of cameras, calm but unwavering. "Raina Ellis doesn't need saving. She saved me, and those children, they are my daughters, and I will protect her, whatever it takes." For the first time, he chose her, publicly, without apology. The press conference was scheduled for Friday in a grand hall at a San Francisco hotel. The media swarmed in like a tide. Cameras, microphones, flashing lights. Everyone was waiting for an answer. Julian walked out first, dressed in a deep navy suit. Raina walked beside him, elegant, poised, her eyes steady. No spokesperson, no PR spin, just truth. Julian began to speak, his voice low and steady as always. But this time it carried something different. He wasn't reading from a script. He was speaking from the heart. Over the past few weeks, an extraordinary woman has been vilified for one simple reason: because she loves her children and lives with integrity. I won't let that continue. He paused, looking at Rihanna. She reached out and took his hand. She doesn't need saving. I'm the one who was saved from a life of illusion, isolation, and coldness. Raina stepped forward. Her voice was soft but clear. I am a mother, a teacher, and I ask for nothing more than to be treated with dignity. A reporter asked, "Do you deny that your relationship with Julian is financially motivated?" Raina smiled, this time with strength. Money didn't hold my daughters when they cried. Money wasn't there in the operating room, and money didn't stay up all night beside an incubator. Julian did. All of it. Not out of obligation, but because he loves us. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. Julian squeezed her hand. We are a family, and no one else gets to define what that means. They left the podium to applause, not because they were rich or victims, but because they had stepped into the light. With love and truth. A week after the press conference, Raina's small Oakland apartment glowed with the soft light of late afternoon. The kitchen smelled of fresh baked bread. In the living room, Nora and Leah giggled, their first time home since the hospital. Raina cradled them in her arms, her hair falling loose, her face makeup-free, but her eyes brighter than ever. She didn't need camera lights. She was living her dream. A home not perfect, but filled with love. Julian stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, rinsing baby bottles while softly humming. A man once in charge of billion-dollar decisions, now drying tiny bottles with gentle hands. Raina came up behind him, wrapped her arms around him. "Thank you," she whispered. Julian turned to her, eyes warm. "I should be saying that." She laughed softly. "Why?" He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box and opened it. A simple, elegant ring with the letters N and L engraved inside. "Because you saved me from myself. Because 2 little girls taught me how to love unconditionally. And because I want to be here, every morning, every sleepless night, with you 3. Raina was still. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at him for a long, full moment and nodded. "We're not perfect, Julian. I know. There'll be rough days, tears, sleepless nights. I look forward to all of it." She laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then, yes." Julian knelt and slipped the ring onto her finger. No fireworks, no stage lights, just baby laughter and the golden sun pooling across the floor. A family, not perfect, but together, and that was enough. The wedding took place on a Sunday afternoon in late autumn, in the small garden behind the community center, where Raina had once sown hope in the hearts of neighborhood children. No castles, no $50,000 gown. Just ribbons in the trees, wooden tables draped in white linen, and the arms of those who loved them truly. Raina wore an ivory lace dress she'd hand-stitched over 3 weeks. Julian wore a simple suit, barely containing his smile as Nora and Leah, his little flower girls, tossed petals with gleeful squeals. Raina walked down the stone path with Dolores by her side, the woman who had guarded her heart like her mother once did. When she met Julian's gaze waiting at the end of the aisle, all sound seemed to fade, except the steady beat of her heart and a silent question. Is this really my life? They exchanged vows, not poetic prose, but promises written through actions over the past year. I can't promise I'll always be right, but I promise I'll always choose you, even when the world doesn't. I may not give you an easy life, but I can give you real love all the way through. As applause broke out after their first kiss as husband and wife, a quiet voice called from the back row. Julian, everyone turned. It was Clara Hartley. She stood there, no makeup, her usual sharp suit replaced with a soft olive dress. In her hands, a small bouquet of wildflowers. Gone was the woman who once held out a check to send Raina away. Clara stepped forward, her eyes meeting her brother's. You were right, I forgot that love doesn't need permission. She turned to Raina, voice trembling. I'm sorry I let fear blind me. I didn't know How brave you really are." Bayona was silent for a moment. Then she stepped forward and embraced Clara tightly. No more resentment, only forgiveness, and the quiet miracle of acceptance. Julian held both their hands, his wife and his sister. That day, not only was a marriage sealed, a family was made whole again, through tears, growth, and the kind of love that dares to begin again. 1 year later, it was a sunny Saturday morning in the northern suburbs of Berkeley. In a cozy little house nestled beside a row of maple trees, children's laughter filled the air. Nora was learning to walk, tiny legs wobbling, hands waving in joy. Leah sat on the rug flipping through picture books, talking to a cat illustration in a language only she understood. Raina sat on the porch steps, a warm mug of coffee in her hands, watching her daughters as if they were the only thing that existed. Her hair was tied up, her sweater bore a few milk stains, but her eyes were filled with a deep, quiet peace. Julian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "Breakfast is ready, chef." "Heart-shaped pancakes again?" she asked, tilting her head with a smile. "This time with smiley faces," he grinned, "by royal request of the princesses." They headed inside. On the walls were colorful scribbles, masterpieces from their budding artists. In the corner stood a tiny easel beside an old rocking chair Raina once used in her classroom. Life was no longer about deals or headlines. It was morning giggles, little feet racing across the floor, and bedtime hugs under warm blankets. And sometimes, in the quiet of night when everyone else was asleep, Raina would open an old notebook. On a page her mother once wrote, "True love doesn't need proof. It just needs to be lived." And now, in a quiet house filled with tiny footsteps and morning laughter, she was finally living it. She would smile because now she was living it every single day.